Hello, welcome to my slideshow entitled That's Why We're Here. It's my understanding of creation, the purpose of the universe, and how we can care for our common home. You can listen to it as a sort of podcast. I read out word for word the text on the right. If you have time, it's better to watch it so you can see the illustrations I've made to help understanding. And there are three types. One is a squiggly character called owl. Another is a round trichart, and the third is the octagonal octicon. You can stop the movie anywhere if you want time to look at the more complicated diagrams. I hope you enjoy the slideshow and look forward to any constructive comments on why we're here. Our Creator, the ground of all being, is beyond description, i.e., transcendent. However, when revealed in creation, i.e. immanent, I think the Creator is best described as a relationship of divine, attractive love. Such a relationship comprises three elements: lover, beloved, and the loving between them. Another way of imagining this is as a love language which needs voice, word, and breath to express itself. In Christian terms, that's the Trinity of three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Divine love can be defined as both an attraction or desire and an act that increases the creativity of another without expecting anything in return. Divine creativity always produces outcomes and creatures that are good, true, and beautiful, i.e., transcendentals. This is the motivation behind the love burst that gave birth to the universe. Understanding and caring for creation requires the help of science, religion, and the arts, working together at the same time in harmony. And that's something very difficult to do without discordant notes, as you will see in universities and academia. And here I'm thinking of Richard Dawkins, his book The God Delusion, and all the other books it spawned. Creation of the universe is like the composition of music. The ancients talked of the music of the spheres. It has harmony, melody, and rhythm. But this universal music is composed of space, time, and energy, and can be difficult to hear. Love energy comes in the form of vibrations, which behave like waves and particles. You can imagine the particles producing the notes or building blocks of the universe, and the wave energy producing the attraction or glue that holds them together. Or maybe it's vice versa. You'll notice that, like the character of our Creator, threes abound in creation. The most fundamental particles are quarks, pronounced quark that way, not quark, with three properties: mass, spin, and charge. And charge can be electric or color. Three types of quarks form three subatomic particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. And these are the building blocks of all the atoms of elements and their more complex brothers and sisters, molecules, compounds, and substances, and even psychedelics. The attraction of love energy, that is like glue holding the particles together, is of three types and strengths. They are the nuclear, electromagnetic, and gravitational force fields. The nuclear holds the nucleus together. The electromagnetic holds the electrons in orbit as well as compounds together. And gravity holds gross matter together. Both gravity and electromagnetism build the universe. Which one is predominant is vigorously debated. Cosmologists and enthusiastic non-specialists, like me, can blow hot and cold about which is the correct one. I think the so-called electric universe theory supports plasma physics best, in concert with gravity, of course. So, from the beginning of time, space was filled with energy in the form of particle waves. Maybe that was the original quintessence, subject to these laws. As space expanded, they gave rise to atoms, starting with the element hydrogen, coalescing into molecules and eventually stars. When these stars reached a critical size, they burst apart as supernova, giving birth to more complex, heavier elements, and continuing with lightweight helium and creating over 100 more. Space then became populated with a soup, what the ancients maybe called ether, formed from clouds of cosmic dust, each called a nebula, which contains separate negatively charged electrons, positively charged nuclei of atoms or ions, and parts of bigger atomic matter called dust. This complex dusty plasma mixture, under the influence of the divine love laws, appears to have had all the properties necessary to form intelligent creatures in the image of their creator. So it's true that, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And that's from the book of Genesis. It seems that dusty plasma can form permanent shapes, strings, spirals, cells, crystals, etc., that can act as memories and minds and can reproduce themselves. These can be precursors and templates for physical organic life. Plasma physics is indeed a new and exciting study that can be explored by both science and theology. Perhaps we'll end up restudying the ancient idea of ether then. As a start, see Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven. I think we should have a term for the study, maybe plasmology, but not plasmatics. That was an outrageously unharmonious hard rock band, if you care to look it up on YouTube. The first intelligent entities created by the divinity from the primordial dusty plasma were soft angels. I highly recommend the book The Physics of Angels by Matthew Fox and Rupert Sheldrake for an overview, although they don't discuss plasma. I think that the angels' immediate role was to help continue creation of the universe through a process of evolution, something that would require eons of time and oodles of space. This eventually led to the formation from dusty plasma of the three atomic states of physical matter, gas, liquid, and solids. These now form the planetary systems around stars, eventually our planet, and our people, and the products we make. It's interesting to note the different opinions of two prominent 13th century theologians on the matter of angels, both named in recognition of them. St. Thomas Aquinas, or the angelic doctor, thought they were entities of pure form and did not need matter to exist. However, St. Bonaventure, the seraphic doctor, argued that they were made of spiritual matter, which is how one could define plasma. I side with the latter Franciscan rather than the former Dominican on this one. The initial role of angels in the process of creation has been to act as divine agents, emissaries, or universal factotums for their master creator. They follow divine ideas through the loving force fields that give form to matter. As such, I think that angels are integrated into or associated with all entities, i.e. creatures, to which creation gives rise. This idea can be described as a form of Christian animism. I think that the ancients intuitively got the right idea, but for the wrong reasons. Sean Sanford Beck's book, Christian Animism, argues this case well, as does Karen Armstrong in her Sacred Nature book. As a Christian, and imagining the three persons of the Trinity, I like to think of the traditional choir hierarchy as three proximities of angels, each with three functions. Those closest to the divine are most like the divine Father or Mind. Those closest to creation are most like the Son or God incarnate, and those in between are most like the Holy Spirit. They really form a sort of holarchy, holes within holes, all very holy. And here's a nice quote from G.K. Chesterton. Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. A good joke, that. Alas, some angels, inevitably it seems, took themselves too seriously and heavily, felt they were divine, forgot their purpose, and a third fell. They chose to modify the force fields to suit their own egos, rather than those of the Creator or creatures. In effect, they seriously misused what we humans would call pride, power, and profit. It was no joke. That, in a nutshell, or is it an eggshell, is my theodicy, which is a justification for evil in a universe created by a loving Creator. Hence, a third of what is good, true, and beautiful in creation is fallen. It suffers from varying degrees of egoism. It has egg all over its face, and is bad, false, and ugly. A demise which is pandemic to all creation. Happily, creation, although fallen and subject to a pandemic of unlove, can also be described as pan-angelic, angels are a part of everything, panentheistic, God is in everything, and panpsychic, divine mind is behind everything. However, a pan-universal battle in the spiritual realm of beings is underway, with good angels versus bad, in which we are now physically involved. Fortunately, the balance is 2-to-1 in favor of the good. Victory will eventually be achieved with God's help. So, as physical planetary systems came into existence, ready for carbon-based life that could evolve from dusty plasma, conditions were not as friendly as they should have been because of all this disharmony. A new form of life would have a struggle to start and stay alive. Based on the principles of competition and survival of the fittest, nature turns out to be red in tooth and claw. This is the antithesis of divine love, and we humans eventually make things even worse. Evolution must surely be redefined as evil-lution. That's E-V-I-L-lution. It seems that angels interact in our lives in many more ways. The good ones protect, guide, and inform, and the bad ones deceive, tempt, and spoil. And maybe there is a class that are amoral and are just divine jokes. Fairies, for instance. I like to think so. Angels do what they do through the existing entities with which they are associated, or independently. They shape-shift into forms most suitable for their purpose, which we can recognize within our changing cultures. Hence, we may perceive them as winged cherubs, devils with horns, helping humans, or simply balls of light, auras, auroras, stars, and galaxies. And note that these are all 99+% plasma. And if you take a bit of time to look at the octagon diagram here, you'll see some of the characteristics of angels, which are defined by Sheldrake and Fox in their book, The Physics of Angels. Because spiritual angels are in fact made of the same fundamental matter that we in the physical world are made from, they can be difficult to distinguish in looks and behavior. Hence biblical stories of angels mating with humans, giants in those days, and guardian angels unawares. There is a lot of scope for speculation here, and maybe plasmology and angelology should be combined into an art of plasmangelics. Such a discipline could help to reveal those secrets of a psychic and pneumatic ether. We are told that the evolution of humanity initially receives divine protection, but the bad, fallen angels shapeshift and insinuate themselves, literally as a snake, into our paradise, that is, the Garden of Eden. They convince us that they know better than God, hence a second fall, where humanity forgets the true knowledge of the divine. Whereas fallen angels cannot pick themselves up and remember God again, all good ones can never forget their Creator. However, humanity always has a choice, and we can choose to remember, forget, or dismiss our Creator throughout our lives. This is reflected in the three channels of knowledge we now have: senses, instinct, and intuition. An imbalance has occurred. We now know more than is good for us. That's the message of the parable of the tree of knowledge. And we are losing our ability to intuit. This is the conclusion to which my father-in-law, David Goyder, came in his book Facing Up to Reality. It's well worth a read as a rational approach to the Christian faith. These ideas are also reflected in the way the two hemispheres of our brain work, tuning into our extended created and divine minds, and the way they are connected, balancing each other. This is described by Ian McGilchrist in his book The Master and His Emissary, and at greater depth in his recent 2-volume magnus opus of The Matter with Things. Ian McGilchrist concludes that we are forgetting to use our creative right hemisphere, which is intuitive and sees the big picture. We have become too materialistic, pulling things apart for the detail, and intent on insisting that science has all the answers. We are forgetting that truth can be found in the storytelling of myths, mythos, in Greek, of religions, as well as the facts, logos, Greek, of science. We can also talk of the logosphere or mythosphere when we talk about the hemispheres. The four natural forces of the universe can now be expressed in ways we humanly love. The strong nuclear force is equivalent to the bonds that keep families together, storge. The gravitational force is equivalent to the bonds that keep friends together, philia. And the electromagnetic forces are equivalent to the physical bonds that keep lovers, partners, or spouses together, that's eros, and sometimes force us apart. The fourth weak nuclear force has been imagined as the divine power that transforms or transmutes relationships entirely, so that people are born again with perfect unconditional love of God, others, and themselves. And that is divine love, or agape. C.S. Lewis explains the four loves in his book of that title, but he does not make the connection with the natural physical forces. Okay, now let's take a look at the dawn of humanity and its state after all this evolution. If the age of the universe is one day, that's 13.8 billion years, then humanity appeared less than 1 second ago, and that's 160,000 years. And if the age of the Earth is one day, 4.5 billion years, or a third of the universe's age, then Homo sapiens appeared 3 to 4 seconds ago. In terms of size, then the diameters of galaxies are bigger than we are by 10 to the power of 19 meters, then quarks are smaller than us, that's 10 to the minus 19 meters. It has taken a lot of space-time for humanity to arrive at where we are now, and that comparison puts us in our place, I think. Now is a good time to summarize what I call a universal pattern of everything, and that is what I call the octagon. Everything and everybody came into being out of nothing but the attractive power of love. All creatures have formed from plasma matter, including angels. Angels are co-creators in the process of evolution that gives rise to us. We humans now have 10 powers to know and love God and creation in return. Creation was good, true and beautiful, but out of selfishness, a third of the angels and all of us misused our powers in unloving ways. As you read or hear about these powers, think of the ways we misuse them and ask the Creator, who is nothing but love, to forgive us and help us use our powers lovingly. The next slides give explanations of each octagon, fractal, facet, faculty, facility, or what I could call a fracality. Everything is made up of matter, and we have the power to observe or pay attention to this stuff using our senses, and to consume or possess things. That's materiality. Everything embodies motion, change, or energy, and we have the power to apply or employ this to work, producing outputs of goods and services. That's what we can call motionality. Everything has a thought, consciousness, or idea behind it, and we have the power to think about and to figure things out using reason to solve problems. That's our intellectuality. And everything tends to reveal or communicate itself, and we have the power to express or explain ourselves and find meaning via religion and science, and that is phenomenality. Everything is made up of parts, and we have the power to reduce, discern, monitor, and measure these particles and elements of creation. That's differentiality. Everything forms a whole, greater than the sum of its parts, and we have the power to integrate stuff, giving direction and finding purpose in the whole. Integrality. Everything has an origin with degrees of freedom, and we have the power to create stuff in many ways for our benefit as innovators with the good angels. That's originality. And everything is influenced by fields, limits, and rules that give order, and we have the power to control, make laws, create form, and oppose the bad angels. That's our influentiality. And finally, everything has an internal formational structure, and we have the power to reflect inwardly about ourselves and the divine using our extended minds. That's internality. And everything is externally related or connected to other things, and we have the power to relate to other people, God, forming loving relationships, relationality. And if you want an illustrated unfolding of these 10 realities, fracalities in detail, then read Al's Little Book of Reality. On account of the fall of the angels, humanity in general, and ourselves in particular, this pale blue marble of earth can be a very unfriendly place to live, and it's getting worse. It is true that 2/3 are still good and beautiful, but we have to admit that 1/3 is bad, ugly, and based on lies and fake news and false expectations instead of good news. For example, having sex is often the antithesis of making love, ending up in hate, rape, or havoc. And note here that lust can be expressed in a positive way as a natural, good, intense, and overwhelming desire. It seems that we're in a free fall of 3 falls. We think we can solve these problems without God, but we can't. So what to do? Well, God has a plan, and we're now in the middle of its implementation and have a role to play. And that's another reason why we're here. In effect, the whole of the universe is now a repair shop and war zone. As Pope Francis has said, our churches should be field hospitals. The good angels and we should all be involved in repairing the damage that the bad angels and all of us humans continue to inflict on each other and creation. We must tackle unlove of our neighbour and our common home. We need to love God and others as ourselves. Paradoxically, it seems that love inevitably comes with unlove. Knowing how to love means experiencing what it is like not to love. In fact, it seems that many characteristics of loving, patience, kindness, forgiving, not being envious, can only be expressed if there is unlove. To remember means that we are able to forget. Our ego, perhaps, is the flip side of God. How to implement these repairs, defend against more damage, and ensure the continued victory of love requires a carefully thought out strategy, cooperative participants, and appropriate timing. And only God can mastermind that. And here's how. Right from the beginning of our existence as humans, we have tried to make sense of the world around us. We've done this through observation, interpreting, and storytelling, using both sides of our brain. As a result, we have come up with many different spiritualities and religions that try to tie our understanding together. Bit by bit, we have hit upon the truth. A good example is our belief in angels, which nearly all religions have acknowledged. We're still learning about them and discovering the truth via religion and science. God built his plan on our existing knowledge, despite it being corrupted by the bad angels and us. God's plan to save us started nearly 4,000 years ago in the form of the Jewish people through whom God chose to reveal the divine plan. The Jews characterized the unique blend of multiple intelligences, religious continuity, cultural endurance, profound persecution, and a persistent connection to the Middle East. It is a story that starts there, continues through a global diaspora, and culminates in the present day with the re-establishment of a Jewish state and all the resulting conflicts of which we are part. How the divine plan was worked out is recorded in the Old and New Testaments of the Christian Bible, which must be read and interpreted with great care. It is centered on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus the Christ. The title Christ refers to the eternal, transcendent, creative principle of God, and the name Jesus refers to the Christ when appearing immanent as a human. As such, he was the Son incarnate of the Trinity, both God and man. This incarnation happened some 2025 years ago and is continuing to be worked out in the lives of Christians and others of goodwill, including you and me. And that's why we're here. Put simply, Jesus' role is fourfold. First, to show us humans how to live in perfect harmony with God, others, and creation. Second, to pay fairly and justly the universal penalties incurred by our failures to love. Third, to give us power to help win the battle against all unlove and to forgive all those who fight against us. And fourth, to enable us to live on with God in love after death. The result of all this is to re-establish the reign of love on earth as it is in heaven after death. I believe that by being made in the image of God, we are all Christ-ins. And this is explained by Richard Rohr in his book, The Universal Christ. We all embody the creative principle of the divine. Many people think that Jesus was just a good role model for showing us how we should live a life of divine love. But Jesus as the Christ is far more than that. In the divine economy of love, there are aspects of our lives already lived that require him to play all the roles here. Much as he and we would like, we alone cannot right the wrongs wrought by the unlove that we and the angels have done. It would not be fair nor feasible just to forgive and forget, essential though that it is. The story of God's revelation and plan to save us through Jews and Gentiles has to be worked out justly in all our social, legal, cultural, economic, political, as well as theological dimensions. Jesus as the Christ is the divine creative principle in human form. A psychologist, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, has suggested that of all human activities, creativity becomes closest to providing the fulfillment we all hope to get in our lives. I think that is when we are most Christ-like. According to his researches, creative people are both and, i.e. balanced, as energetic but focused, smart, which may not equal IQ, but also naive, i.e. childlike, playful yet disciplined or persevering, realistic dreamers, extroverted and introverted, proud of ideas yet modest, not weighed down by rigid gender roles, conservative yet rebellious, passionate but objective about their work, are sensitive and open to experience, and happy and joyful. So we need to find this balance in ourselves. Jesus was joyful and happy, despite how the authors of some books, including the Bible, might portray him. An analysis of what constitutes joy comes out of a book written jointly by the Buddhist Dalai Lama and a Christian Archbishop. It is an excellent example of how different religious beliefs can come to an agreement of what is the best way of living from a well-being's perspective. What differs between the authors appears to be the final goal or purpose of life. But even there, it can be argued that they are the same, depending on how we understand the transcendent. The Octagon map lists 8 attitudes to life that the authors say that need to be embraced for joy to arise. If God, who is divine love, as Christians believe, is at the center of our lives, then the ways we behave should be transformed as shown opposite. And you'll have to stop the video here to just take a look at them. There are many places in the Bible that describe the characteristics of love. I've mapped the 3 groups of traits onto the Octagon faculty that might be the most involved in expressing them, and they are the Christian virtues, fruits of the Spirit, and facets of love. So here are a few questions about these. Which of these traits do you find least easy to show? Do you think the extent to which they are shown has anything to do with your personality? And who or what helps a Christian to become more loving? When we give space for God in our lives, there are many divine gifts which can be given to us and we need to unwrap. Without them, trying to act lovingly is impossible, as the fallen angels and all of us humans have found out. Unfortunately, many people still think that loving behavior is possible through our own efforts. We do have an innate capacity to be altruistic and kind, but it only goes so far without divine help. If our ego is at the center of our lives instead of God, when the crunch comes, we will fail and fall again. And there are 4 lists of gifts in St. Paul's letters to early Christians. To understand them, you'll need to read the biblical books. And these are 7 golden oldie gifts, 7 motivational gifts, 5 ministerial gifts, and 8 charismatic gifts. No greater love can someone show than giving up their life for someone else, especially if that someone is an enemy. That's what Jesus did, but then came alive again. So what happens when we die? I think that we'll be judged on the divine love we have released, expressed or shown. Being made in the image of God, we have all shown some of that love despite how unloving our lives might have been. That means we will have to come to both traditional and unorthodox conclusions to make sense of what it means to be made and saved in the image of a loving God. Here's how I have worked out our salvation. Whatever love we have shown will never be perfect and cannot be reunited with God without a period of refining, which will be a fiery experience. But I believe that only the unlove will be torn from us and burnt up in the so-called fires of hell. That's because God's love can be found in all of us, body and soul, and cannot be destroyed. Our loving actions or talents, once purified, will be stored up like treasures and counted in our favour. Our role in the body of Christ will be as diverse as the different parts of our natural body. All will be as essential and as lovely as each other, and that includes our microbiomes. So there is hope for even the worst of us. And that's my Soteriology 2.1. And soteriology means the study of salvation. We might be justifiably worried about what happens after we die, but we should also be very concerned about the current socio-environmental crisis we are now beginning to live through and with which our children will have to cope. There is no heaven on earth in many quarters. We should all watch the People's Emergency Briefing film that explains the environmental crises that we now need to address, as well as the political, financial, social and religious ones. We can all do something, and here is an example inspired by Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si on caring for our common home, which is a document we should all also read. Re-encycling is my framework for action, showing the ways we can promote our well-being and environmental solutions that lead to care for our common home. It's based on the octagon and its 10 powers or faculties that form complementary but opposing pairs. We must continually recycle through them if we are to achieve our personal and global well-being that is ecologically and economically sustainable. We need to use all our sensory powers to observe what is the matter with everything and act upon and apply the knowledge we obtain so that we can continually reduce or reject input that we might consume which is unnecessary, unhealthy or unsustainable. We need to eat healthily, avoid waste and reuse or react critically to what we produce as output. We need to be proactive and promote changes in existing courses of action that are both physical and social, individual and corporate, for example by demonstrations, marches, lobbying, etc. We need to continually use our powers to think about and interpret things, re-expressing our ideas so that we can continually rethink problems and restate solutions in more accessible and inclusive ways. We need to re-examine how we use our brains to find meaning, i.e. balancing left-right brain thinking and their corresponding powers, employ science, challenging dogma, and embrace the magisterium of both science and religion to find the knowledge of what is true. We need to be spiritually and holistically intelligent. We need to continually use our powers to differentiate parts and integrate things into wholes, finding their purpose, so that we can embrace the complexity of diversity, learning to repair and to repurpose stuff. We need to maintain our possessions properly, and when unusable for their original purpose, repurpose them or upcycle them. Most importantly, we need to allow our own bodies to repair themselves by taking preventative health and safety measures, avoiding unnecessary risks, and taking appropriate medicines when needed. We need to continually use our freedom to create new things and to control them, so that we can recreate new ideas and, whenever required, restrict their use. We need to allow ourselves time for personal recreation so that our mind, body and spirit can recreate themselves as well. We also need to accept and obey restrictions, laws, limits and regulations that we will inevitably have to follow as we develop new ideas and technologies so as to ensure that they are benign. We need to break habits and create new. We need to continually use our powers to reflect and relate so that we can reconnect inwardly with the divine by meditating and praying about all the issues and actions involved in caring for ourselves and our common home. We need also to reconnect outwardly, restoring and making new relationships, following the divine command to love God and others as we love ourselves and our environment. It is up to each one of us to renew our thinking and re-cycle everything continually. For our well-being, we need news about events, friends, churches, politics, or whatever that builds us up as human beings. The good news of Jesus the Christ, properly understood and practiced, covertly or overtly, should do all these things through his followers, whether unwittingly as Christians, and that is, Christ is within all of us, whatever our religion or none, see Richard Rohr, or intentionally as Christians. Christ is fully acknowledged and allowed to help us. The most important thing is to practice and proclaim unconditional divine love. During the time leading up to Pentecost, 50 days after Easter, I completed this explanation of my understanding of why we're here in this universe and what is its purpose. Pentecost is when Jesus the Christ returned to heaven and subsequently sent his Spirit, Ruah, to help us overcome the forces of unlove. A good way to finish is to be reminded of the three theological virtues of faith, hope and love. Faith remembers the past and what our Creator has done. Hope imagines the future and what our Creator will do. And love examines the present and what we need to do now. Of these three virtues, divine love is the greatest, and we can all play our part in meeting our needs for it. That's the reason why we're here in this universe.